Most conferences or gatherings like this, they're a great day, you make some great connections, you dissipate, and there's not a lot more you can do. And that's been the history of physical gatherings, that's been bringing together smart people forever. But there is essentially a tool that we've watched on the web that has just been so amazingly powerful in so many areas in just the last 15 years. 15 years ago, people didn't know what an email was. They didn't know what the World Wide Web is. The power of that, I come out of the kind of Northern Valley and watching that kind of new media happen, has just been phenomenal. And what it hasn't really been doing is connected this kind of thinking, these kind of networks, this kind of like thought, kind of collaborative work yet. And now I'm not saying Next Agenda is the next way to do this, but what we're committed to do is figuring out how you can bring together the things that people do well together, the emotional power of someone really connecting with people, the real working things out, the real kind of compromise that has to come over face-to-face kind of struggles. How do you get that, which is essential and not replicable online, frankly? And how do you tie it, though, to what the web and online tools do far better than this? It's mature. It's ready. It's ready to start connecting what this kind of discussion is for what it actually does well. And what the web does well, or the internet in general, is it has an extraordinary ability to scale. The numbers in this room are just, even if we had a room of 500 people, maybe max 1,000, you just would hit top out in face-to-face. The web allows hundreds of thousands, literally millions of people. We watch it in so many different categories. So just I want to remind you, it has an incredible ability to scale. The other thing the web actually does is it has an incredible ability to parallel process. Because you can scale so many people up, you can start to actually do things simultaneously alongside itself. This is one of the server farms. This is a Google server farm like, right? They take a question, they parse it into gazillions of kind of people running for it, and they bring it back up in lightning speed. What we got to start thinking about in terms of problem solving is that same kind of parallel processing. I showed you earlier in the day all the different areas. It's not just climate change issues, it's not just energy issues. You know, there's global pandemic issues. There's all kinds of security issues. There's, you know, globalization of jobs. I mean, all kinds of issues. We got to start breaking those things down and actually looking at the subunits of, you know, here's our kind of energy issue. There's wind, there's solar. We have to start scaling this, and we have to start parallel processing this. Again, something the web does well. The other thing the web does, here we are in San Francisco. One of the reasons you see the politics is kind of skewed is when you draw off a local community here, even bringing people from San Francisco, a few from Colorado, there tends to be geographic kind of constraints on the kind of viewpoints. The beauty of the web, the beauty of the power of video and the kind of video connections you can do now, it starts to collapse space. We know this in all the Skype issues and all these other issues, that you can actually start to do things that up until now you couldn't do. Now that's a kind of generic way to think about it. But I'm saying what we're going to start to try to do is try to at least, in innovative beginning steps, to start to really start working in a hopeful way. How would we start to do that? Well, the first thing to start to do that is you bring together innovators like this, you capture as much of it on video as possible. And not boring back of the room C-SPAN kind of stuff, but we parsed up hundreds and thousands of little bits of information, side interviews, all kinds of things, from multiple cameras, and we're going to start to actually tell this story and replicate what was going on here and start to get these ideas moving on to the web in a different way. This is, I mean, you maybe have seen our current website through the summer was essentially a placeholder website. This is literally the new website that is really about to go online in the next week or two, and all the video from this will start to be moved into a new web environment. But as you see here, there's a couple things going on here. We also are finding that there's a web, I don't know if you see below my picture there. Sorry, it's my picture. That was just the kind of mock-up. There's a whiteboard, a virtual whiteboard there. We've actually got a team of really interesting people figuring out how do we actually organize all these pieces of video, all these pieces of information in a way that actually makes it make sense online, and people can actually move through the video, not just sitting through an hour-long kind of version of a video reminder of this thing, but see all the pieces coming together in the way they want to do. We're starting to use video in new ways, in ways that can actually not only bring together more people like yourself, hundreds, thousands, maybe more, but also start to expose this to much larger audiences, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, hopefully over time, millions of people, because that's the second people. It's not just people like yourselves to expand that circle, it's to start to expand these ideas in a much broader way out into the public at large. The other piece I just want to mention here is we're basically connecting this, for those technical people here, into seamless interconnection with other social media spaces. So for example, anyone on Facebook will now be able to connect to this website, and all your information on Facebook is open to us, and anything you do on this thing will actually be able to move into Facebook. There's essentially the seamless interconnection of these social media is now starting to be possible, that you don't have to like re-sign up into Next Agenda and bring in your friends and put a picture in. All you have to do is connect through Facebook, or connect up your Facebook thing, and it can pull your little photo from Facebook in there. It can pull your friends in if you want. It takes things that you do on Next Agenda and puts it out through your whole Facebook network. Let me give you just some numbers here. These are the 10 most populous countries in the world. Those two big ones are China, India. This is Facebook. Facebook is the 5th largest country in the world right now, and everybody there is college educated or on their way to being college educated. That's not a bunch of peasants. That's not, you know, Joe Sixpack. That's college educated, completely energized people. There's 200 million. Not only that, Facebook is essentially adding 700,000 new people a day. That was the numbers that were coming out in the summer. That's as big as the Los Angeles Times, which is like struggling to collapse. They're adding that many people in a day. And also the other thing about this is 2/3 of them are outside the United States. Now, if you can start moving into those kind of networks and you start getting people connecting up this stuff, this is far more powerful potentially than, you know, we can get a 30-second ad on CNN. Or, you know what, we can send out an email to, you know, 1,000 people here. The idea is we're just seeing the beginnings of essentially a different way to start leveraging the web and start leveraging media through the web. And so when you get a thing like this Copenhagen thing that's going on in November here, when all the eyeballs on the planet are going to start tuning into that through traditional media and what else, there's going to be a way that just through simple Google searches and all kinds of different ways through Facebook and others, you can connect up a lot of eyeballs. You can connect up a lot of different people differently. And this is something that we're going to try to take advantage of. The third thing we're doing here is we're starting with the very beginnings of some collaborative web tools. You know, there are some certain mature technologies now, wikis, being able, many people to work on the same document. It used to be very kludgy. It's actually still kind of difficult for people non-technical. But these are maturing to the point where you can start to do real collaborative work online, and again, scaling hundreds or thousands of people over time. There's many of them. We're just doing a very simple one to start out. We're a startup, and we're kind of going as fast as we can here. This one is essentially a question-and-answer form that, in fact, anyone in this group, for example, will all be signed up. You could ask a question. You can answer questions. It'll actually start to aggregate in different ways. And then, of course, we are going to have some other gatherings and things like that. But the key thing here is that if you were talking in politics 5 years ago that you know, a guy like Obama would win, you know, the election, or that you could shift like that, people would just think is absolutely ludicrous. If you were talking to people 10 years ago that you'd have this thing on the web, that, you know, YouTube, that you'd basically have 200 million videos a day go off of YouTube right now. If you'd start, I mean, the power of these basically online tools and this online media is being very much underestimated, I think, in this space. And one of the things we're trying to position ourselves to do is to help innovate in this space and start to kind of take the some of the wild cards of how we can solve this are in these kind of, actually, Eli was talking about these moments where things change very quickly. And I think there's one thing that we are underestimating is the power of media, although Hiroshi was talking about collaborative tools. The social media people were kind of pointing towards it. There is a moment here where we're going to watch a real sea change. You're watching the collapsing of the old media. You're watching newspapers going down. You're watching all these struggles in traditional media, but you're watching these explosive numbers like Facebook, YouTube, and others. Pay attention to that, and I think that's one reason to kind of give us some hope here. This is the first and opening day of just getting people together. This was an emergent day. We had no idea who was coming here. That's why we didn't have it choreographed with, you know, we had new Republicans or business people. We put out to a lot of business people, and they're too busy or they couldn't get here. Or we put out to all kinds of political perspectives. But you know what? It's an emergent thing today. That's the web. That's essentially the network effect. And we're just starting. But I think with time, the idea is not to be partisan. It's not to be on one side or the other. It's not to be too kind of activist or too non-business. It's to be, as Americans, stripped down of what, not, you know, where your business is or how you can make your next money, but as Americans, with all the skills and talents and innovative abilities we have, how do we reconfigure as a different kind of group and take on a problem that is common to all of us? And that's what we're trying to do here, both in the big picture of how do we solve climate change, the relative smaller picture of how we would just get the electrical grid onto clean energy, and ultimately even just like how would we take a meeting like this and all these ideas and start to build on these ideas and start to get more people involved and ultimately to move it into the web. These are all challenges. They're all ultimately solvable, and we're all going to try to throw ourselves at it in the next 6 months.